It's time for the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, a podcast so good it doesn't need a name. So without any further ado, here's your host, JD. Take it away, Johnny.
Hello my friends and welcome to episode 44 of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast, recorded on May 11th, 2014. It's Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there. I'm your host JD aka Gaddick Teague, and in today's episode we talk about bolster and story mode ops, and the gambling problem that could happen in SWTOR. This may be a hot one, so definitely want to stick around. Let's force leap right in.
Red 2, I've got a topic coming in hot, requesting clearance to engage.
Lock as foils in attack positions. You are cleared to discuss.
On Wednesday, Bruce McLean gave us an update to his roadmap to 2014. This one is a second Summer of SWTOR announcement. Everyone, well, if you were around back last summer, you probably remember the underwhelming Summer of SWTOR announcement at the beginning of that summer. And this is a nice update for this coming one. He says, I'm here to provide an updated look at the upcoming Summer of SWTOR in light of our recent Galactic Stronghold announcement. This was the pushing back of Galactic Stronghold. The biggest changes to our summer plans, outside of Galactic Strongholds, are Game Update 2.8, which Galactic Strongholds was supposed to be in. Here's a look at the next 4 months, including that update, and not including the May 4th, 11th, and 15th subscriber benefits deadlines, which they've already talked about, we've already talked about. So, Game Update 2.8 on June 10th, the Nar Shaddaa Casino. For the first time, players are invited to the casinos in Nar Shaddaa to try their luck on the slot machines. Credits can be used to purchase tokens, which in turn can be used on the slot machines. Lucky winners will receive certificates that can be traded in for unique rewards that will only be distributed during the Nar Shaddaa Nightlife event. This event will run from June 10th to August 19th. So that's interesting, and I will definitely be talking about that more in depth in the second segment. Might be a long one, so I'm going to give that its own special segment, and we'll talk about that later, because I have some very strong opinions on that, which you may have seen if you follow me on Twitter or go on the SWTOR subreddit. Double fleet requisition, Warzone comms, and credits for PvP matches. For 3 weeks at a time, events will run that yield increased rewards for participating players. Galactic Strongholds will grant double the fleet requisition. I said Galactic Strongholds, didn't I? Damn it, now they're talking about Starfighter again, and I have to... Galactic Starfighter will grant double the fleet requisition and double the credit rewards they would normally get. Warzones will similarly give players double the standard Warzone comms and double the credit rewards. It doesn't say ranked Warzone comms, so I'm guessing that this will only be for basic Warzones, which is fine, I guess. I mean, it would be nice if they did a special ranked Warzone weekend, but maybe that would encourage 2&8 players who shouldn't be in ranked Warzones to do it. Doing like a double ranked Warzone weekend, I don't know if that would be a good idea. I don't think it would be a good idea. The increased rewards only apply to the rewards on the scorecard at the end of the match, not the rewards you get from daily and weekly missions. Okay, so it's not like a crazy double XP weekend where everything is doubled, only specific things. The Starfighter event will be from 2.8 to 2.8.1, and the Warzone event will be from 2.8.1 to 2.8.2. I don't believe we have specific dates on those yet, but it's nice to see that they'll be going for a nice stretch of time so players can get in at their leisure. I know the weekend double XP kind of sucks for some people who can't play on weekends, they can only play at night, or, you know, people's schedules are different, and it's nice to see them accommodating people with different schedules. The Group Finder Operations Overhaul, which will be the focus of this segment. Story mode operations will be more accessible to endgame players. The Operations section in the Group Finder window will list available operations on a predetermined schedule, rotating in different operations every few days. Players who meet the level requirement of the operation will be bolstered, removing the requirement for endgame gear. Rewards have also been improved, making it a great opportunity for players to earn ultimate commendations and experience new content. These operations will also be for 16-man mode, to ensure faster queue times, because both 8 and 16 need 2 tanks, and that is typically the gating factor. 16-man is also more forgiving to mistakes and should increase the chances of a successful group. So there's several interesting points there, and I'll leave the most contentious for last. The 16-man mode choice, I could see where they're going there. It definitely does allow for more player mistakes as a motorcycle roars right past my window. 16-man definitely does allow for more player mistakes. I think that's a good thing for random grouping. You should try and ease the sting of not being invent, not being a coordinated group, and possibly for some players just not being very good. I think that's a good idea. The problem I see with this is there are a lot of players whose computers can't handle 16-man mode. This game and most MMOs are tailored to a wide array of different computer hardware and letting players of varying levels get into the game. And I think that could be a problem, because I know even on my computer, which is pretty damn good, sometimes I have problems when there's lots of AoE going around in a 16-man. If there's a bunch of flybys and force quakes and things like that, my computer even slows down. Frame rate definitely drops. So I could see that being an issue for some other people, which it would be kind of cool if there was both an 8 and 16-man option. But I guess for those players, and this is how I feel about random grouping type deals, is if you have an issue that you know is a personal problem, things like your computer isn't necessarily good enough, or your schedule is kind of hectic and you may have to get up to tend to a child or something like that, going into a random group isn't fair to the other players in that group. There are plenty of guilds out there who are more than happy to work with you. There are plenty of casual guilds out there. There are plenty of hardcore guilds out there who only run 8-mans. There are plenty of people out there who are more than happy to work with your schedule and work with what you're doing. But going into a random group knowing that you're going to have issues is unfair to the other 15 people in this case. So just find a guild if you want to do these things. There's nothing wrong with being in a guild. There are some people out there who have irrational fears about being in a guild. There are plenty of great people playing this game. Find a guild and they'll be more than happy to work with you. If you get into a group and all of a sudden you have to AFK for 15 minutes in the middle of it, that's hurting everyone else and you're just doing a disservice to everyone. So just keep that in mind. There are some hardware issues that you could have with 16-man, so please keep that in mind. But overall, I think it's great that they are getting these operations into the story mode group finder. I actually asked this question directly to Andrew Horowitz about the story mode operations. If you go back to my New York City Cantina, which I refer to a lot, there's a lot of questions that I asked there that are finally coming to fruition, which is interesting. So maybe you should go back and listen to that episode. I asked him why Dread Palace and Dread Fortress hadn't showed up on the operations group finder, and he said that there were technical issues behind the scenes, so it looks like they worked them out. I would guess one of those technical issues that he was talking about is the bolster system. They didn't feel right getting random players into the game, or into an operation that they couldn't complete with the gear that they had on. They had to figure out a way to gate fresh 55s from getting into an operation. So the bolster system is a great way to do that. I personally think that the way they've done flashpoints in this game, flashpoints are more fun diversions than training grounds to get into operations. In other games, say WoW for a while, I don't know how they do it now, but then they did start re-nerfing the hard modes. WoW's hard mode 4-mans were there to train you to get into into 10-man rating or 25-man rating. In BC, all the hard modes there were really hard, and you had to be well coordinated to get those done, and that trained you to get into bigger, greater content. But that's not the way this game is set up. The flashpoints are really there for the story, to have something to do when you just have a small group on and want to get in to do something. It's on a different scale than the operations. I think it's a good idea to have players getting to operations to do more operations. They've done a great job of keeping the stepladder of operations going. You get into your story modes, and then you do hard mode TFB or hard mode S&V. Then you get into the hard mode Dread Palace, Dread Fortress. They've done a good job keeping that. These friggin' motorcycles today, man. I don't know what's going on. It must be a motorcycle rally or something going on outside. Sorry if that's really bad. I'll see in post-production how bad this is, but it does look kind of bad on the levels right now. I apologize for that. But that stepladder is great, and I think more players should be encouraged to get into operations, because there are a subset of players out there who are just afraid to get into operations because they've never done them before, and it can be scary jumping into a pug on fleet. The group finder is a great way to do that, and one of the problems that you have with the group finder, and this is the same reason I defend bolster to the death in regular war zones, is you have no control over who you're getting grouped up with. So there has to be some kind of reasonable expectation that you'll be able to complete the content you're going into with the random people you're getting into. You're never going to be able to get bad players out of a random group finding system, but you can at least give all players some insurance that they will be able to finish the dungeon that they're getting into. And bolster is great for that. This isn't top-end rating, this isn't nightmare mode operations, and just like I don't think ranked war zones should have bolster at all, even though they do still, I don't believe that nightmare mode operations or hard mode operations should have any bolster at all. Bolster should be just for story mode, going in through the group finder. From reading this sentence here, players who meet the level requirement of the operation will be bolstered, removing the requirement for endgame gear. That doesn't really clarify if it will be in just every operation you do or just when you get through it in story mode, but I think that they should definitely not have it in your hard mode operations. That's where you should be collecting your gear. You should have to go through these story modes a few times to collect that gear so that you can do your hard modes and gear up that way and get on that step ladder. The story mode operations in this game also are great trainers for getting into hard modes. They aren't necessarily the hardest things in the world, obviously, but they're also not the easiest. You actually have to do the mechanics in a lot of these story modes if you're just getting in bolstered gear, which I think is great. I think it's great that story mode players get some challenge. It's not necessarily the hardest challenge, and yes, you could screw up some of the mechanics, but for the most part, if you don't do any of the mechanics, you're gonna die. It's great that they have this training ground that players can get into and learn how to raid, and they get gear for doing it, and hopefully that'll incentivize them to get into a guild, to get into an operations group that runs regularly, and maybe you try out the hard modes, you try out the nightmare modes. Well, maybe not the nightmare modes right away, but eventually you'll get into it. So I think that operations being on the group finder and bolster are great additions to the game, and those who feel otherwise I feel are short-sighted, just like the ones who disagree with bolster in regular war zones. That's where I feel on that one. And since we're talking about Nightmare, we'll go through the rest of these bullet points. Nightmare Mode Dread Palace. Face the ultimate challenge. Dread Masters in their palace with new Nightmare Mode, mechanics and difficulty. I've heard some positive things about this, but there really hasn't been a ton of chatter about it on the PTS, so I'm not sure what's going on there. The Nightmare Dread Fortress update. The Nightmare Dread Fortress difficulty buff will be removed. All of the new Nightmare Dread Fortress mechanics are still in place, but it should now be more accessible to larger groups. Fair warning, the unique title for defeating the Nightmare Fortress with a buff present will never again be available for those who don't unlock it prior to this game update. And I've said this before, but I'll just reiterate it here. I think that if they're going to use this Nightmare Mode buff thing, they should just have 4 levels of difficulty. You should have Nightmare Mode and Nightmare Mode Plus, and you should be able to switch between them at any time. You don't arbitrarily remove it for no reason. I agree with the taking away of a title over a certain period of time. I like that they're taking the title away. I think this is a good amount of time to let players do it, but I don't agree with taking away the difficulty. For a company and for a development team that seems so against burning content, as they put it, why would they burn this special Nightmare Mode? Why would they burn that content? That's basically what they're doing. Like, they're taking that out of the game. I don't understand why they would do that. That just hurts players who want to do this content. You know, maybe I don't get the title, but I still want to kill Barantas on Nightmare Mode. On real Nightmare Mode, not specialty, you know, handicap Nightmare Mode. I don't like that. I want to try it at its hardest and beat it at its hardest. And the reward for me doesn't have to be a title, just defeating it will make me satisfied and make me happy. And then final 2 bullet points here. 2 new Starfighter variants will be available to pilots on both sides of the conflict. The Skirmisher gunship fills a sniper role and brings dogfighting capabilities to the table. Don't all gunships fill sniper roles? But I guess the dogfighting thing is kinda unique to a gunship. while the assault bomber is a heavy fighter that focuses on either mines or drones. Okay, that's kind of cool. And the usual host of additional features, including some graphics improvements and class balance changes. They also talk about events. We'll be running every one of our major recurring events over the period between 2.8 and 2.9. Events include Double XP Weekend, the GRE event. Double XP Weekend, I'm guessing, will be July 4th weekend, just like it was last time. I feel like that's a great time for Double XP. Everyone's happy, everyone's drunk, everyone's getting Double XP. Please drink responsibly. Don't drink if you're under 21 or whatever it is, the legal age for drinking in whatever country you're from. The GRE event will be coming back. A lot of players have been asking for the GRE event to come back. Well, that will be back between 2.8 and 2.9. Bounty Contract Week, obviously, is running monthly. That's kind of been quiet, but it has been coming back every month, so that's pretty cool. And then the Rakghoul Resurgence. Obviously, the Rakghoul Plague was completely eliminated last time. The galaxy's absolutely safe from another outbreak, right? Well, we'll be seeing the Rakghoul event coming back soon. Game Update 2.9 is still on for August 19th with our expanded feature set for Galactic Strongholds, which I'm really excited for, and I can't wait to see it. The team is making great progress on Strongholds, and we are very excited to share this with you. It's worth noting that Game Update 2.9 will include the next exciting chapter for the Forge Alliance's story arc. Maybe we'll be seeing a Madon Flashpoint in there. And we have a lot of folks working on something very big for later this year that I have yet to give details on, and this is most obviously the expansion that will be coming later this year. May the Force be with you, Bruce McLean. So, it wasn't as expansive as a breakdown. It didn't go as far into the future as last year's. Maybe it did. I'll have to go back and look at last year's Summer of SWTOR update. But it definitely isn't as detailed as last year's Summer of SWTOR update, where they detailed 3 patches, I believe it was. 3 patches of content for the summer. This is only 2 patches, and it doesn't really detail 2.9 at all, which I know may have upset some people. But overall, I think they did a good job of breaking things down, and I'm definitely happy to see some of this content coming in the future. Now, what you've all been waiting for, the Nar Shaddaa Casino. I'll be talking about it right after the break. And this is the one I'm sure you're all waiting for. So, let's go over the Nar Shaddaa Casino event. For the first time, players are invited to play casinos in Nar Shaddaa to try their luck on slot machines. Credits can be used to purchase tokens, which in turn can be used on slot machines. Well, well, well. If you listen to the show at all, you know I've talked about gambling. In the past, I thought it would be a very good idea to add gambling to the game. But you'll notice that every time I talked about it, I said that they would have to do some different kind of gambling, something that wasn't directly tied to credits, because of the cartel market, which provides a direct link from real money to credits. Yes, there is some work you have to do in the middle there, but regardless, the game has the means to transfer real-world money to in-game money, even though it's not a direct one-to-one or there's no direct way to purchase it on the cartel market. So if you've been following me on social media recently, you will know that I am strongly opposed to what is laid out here in these two sentences. Now, let me preface all of this by saying yes, we have very little information about this. I was directed to game designer Chris Schmidt, who is the one who designed the slot machines minigame, by @DruidsFire on Twitter. Thank you very much for getting me in touch with him. He said, I don't think we're going into details just yet, but I would caution against assumptions at this point. Which I responded by saying, is it fair to say that players will be able to use credits obtained by selling cartel market items to play slots? Which I don't think is even an assumption, seeing as this sentence, written in Bruce McLean's update, says very clearly credits can be used to purchase tokens, which in turn can be used on slot machines. So I think that's just a statement of fact. I just wanted to clarify that. So the response was, can I say there's more than one way to skin a cat? I think so, but don't worry, I love cats. No actual skinning here, and I was going to get on Bioware there for skinning cats, the evil bastards. And then finally I asked if and when it will be on the PTS, and he said that he doesn't believe it will be. Similar to the past events, I wouldn't expect to see it on the PTS. Well, so I guess let me start there, because that's been a point of criticism that I received on this, is the fact that yes, a lot of the things that I'm talking about is speculation. Speculation based on what is written here and some information gleaned from SWTOR Minor continuing his exceptional work, what he's gotten off the PTS so far. But yeah, a lot of it is speculative. But when you release something like the producer's roadmap or the teaser videos that they've been putting out, the point is to get people talking. If they didn't want people talking about it, then they shouldn't say anything at all. So, yes, there is going to be some speculation in this section. And yes, if it turns out that some of my speculation was wrong, then yeah, that's fine, and I will be happy to say, you know, I was wrong in the end. I would love to be wrong in this, because I think it is very, very grimy. I don't like how this feels, and I think that's the main thing. And I don't necessarily think that it's wrong for them to add this in the game. I don't think it's wrong for players to want this in the game. I'm not saying that adding slots is bad. It just kind of feels slimy to me. I don't like it. It feels wrong for many reasons. The first of which is the fact that there is that real money pipeline. And when you have gambling, there are people that have problems. Gambling addiction is a real thing. It's listed in the DSM-5. People have problems with gambling. There are inherent issues with gambling. And then when you tie that to real-world money, that's when you have a problem. This is a video game, something people do for fun. People do it for enjoyment, and I don't want to hold other players back from that. And I really don't think it's unreasonable to say that this could be done in a way that isn't harmful to any subset of people. And when you don't have to pay much of a premium to help a small group of people, you should do it. There is such a thing as the tyranny of the majority. And this is a response I've gotten from a lot of people, and that's, well, this is only really going to affect a very small subset of people, so is it really fair to take away from the majority for that small minority? And for the most part, I agree that majority rules. You know, if something is fun for most people, but not for a small subset of people, then yeah, the majority should usually win out. But if it's something that the majority has to give up such a small amount, or nothing at all, this could be done in such a way where there isn't a direct pipeline from real money to credits. As I've discussed previously talking about this topic, they could do some kind of commendation system, some kind of reputation system. I know there are players out there who say, well, I have a ton of credits, I want something to spend them on. There are plenty of other things to spend your credits on. And if you are in that tiny, tiny minority of people that have, you know, millions upon billions of credits, you're in just as small a group as those people who may have problems with gambling in the game. And another issue I have with this is it's not even interesting gambling, it's not even cool gambling, it's slots. From the information we've got from SWTOR Minor, it looks like there are going to be a couple different kinds of slot machines, but basically you're going to pull a lever and it's going to have a couple of different outcomes, and then boom, you're done. That's no different from walking into a casino and playing a slot machine. And really, slots are like the least sexy. When you think of slots, you think of like going in and there's a bunch of old people who came on a bus from wherever, sitting at the penny slot machines with their big cups. Like, it's not sexy. When you think of like sexy Las Vegas, you think of playing craps or roulette or something like that. This is just slots. It has nothing to do with Star Wars. It's not Pazak. It's not Sabak. Maybe if it was one of those things, I could feel a little bit better about it. This is something that has no direct correlation to the Star Wars universe. On Wikipedia, they have one listing of slot machines happening in the universe in some random book, in 2 random books. It just seems like the laziest, most boring implementation of gambling they could have done. And you pile that on top of the problems that people could have with gambling addiction. You pile that on top of the fact that there are kids playing this game. The game in the US is rated T for teen, which means it's suggested for players 13 and up. And if you look up on the ESRB, it actually does list simulated gambling under T, but with the ability in place to transfer real money into credits, where do you stop that simulated gambling and turn it into possible real gambling? Even if it's something that just affects like one kid, that's more than it has to. Something like this doesn't have to exist. We don't need these real-world games entering into the Star Wars The Old Republic. Sure, add Pazak, add Sabak, add other means of monetizing these things that don't involve the credit system, so you're not tainted by people spending real-world money to buy things. I could also see this ending up as a just PR disaster in so many different ways. Just look at all the problems iOS apps are having right now, with kids stealing their parents' credit cards and spending thousands of dollars with in-app purchases. The same thing could happen with a system like this, where a kid spends $1,000 on cartel market items, sells them, and then plays them on slots. That's a great headline right there. Kid steals $1,000 for Star Wars Casino online. That's what this will be labeled as. Because it's not something that is deeply Star Wars like Pazak or Sabak, where outside people wouldn't necessarily understand it. It's straight up slot machines, things that are real games and are real problems in real casinos. And would it really hurt that many people if they didn't add slot machines into the game? What if they took all of the special stuff that you can get through these things and added it to the Shevin Event 2.0? Would that really hurt you? If you really want to play slots, you can do it on the iPad for free. I just looked up, there are 10 different slot machine apps that you get download for free. No payment required at all. You just play it. I mean, who really needs that to be in Star Wars? Do the RPers really need the slot machines in there when you're not getting Pazak or Sabak? Like, if this was just them saying, okay, you can spend credits or bet credits playing one of the Star Wars card games, I don't think it would be or feel that slimy. If it was just slot machines, but you couldn't use real credits, there was no pipeline from real money to playing the game, it wouldn't feel so bad. But all of these things do exist, and I think it's important to see everything as a whole and not just one new game update. And like I said at the beginning of the segment, I don't think it's wrong if they add slots into the game. I don't think that it's wrong if people want to play it in the game. That's fine, that's your choice. Like I said, there are other places you can do it. But if you really wanted it to SWTOR, I just think the implementation needs to be looked at and needs to be hammered out before it goes live. Because there are issues, real-world issues, when you add in something like a slot machine into your game. Some people say that the cartel packs are basically slot machines, and what's the difference between a slot machine and a cartel pack? They're both random and you're spending your money on them. Because with a cartel pack, there's no direct analog to something we see in the real world. The closest thing is probably a card game, trading card game pack, where you buy a card game pack, you don't know what's in it, you get it, it's fun opening it and looking what you get, and that's that. You always get something, you always end up with something. Might not necessarily be something you want, but it has contents in it, and that's what you're buying. With slot machines, there is a direct real-world analog to slot machines in the real world, and those cause problems. So I think it's fair to say that you need to have a lighter touch and look much, much more deeper into something like a slot machine than a cartel pack. So I really hope this is something they take a look at, they change in some form or fashion, or maybe they already have something in place to prevent this from happening. It feels like the Smurfville or whatever on iOS, that they're just trying to get kids to spend mommy's credit card in their game without their parents knowing. It feels wrong to me, it feels bad to me, and I just can't shake that feeling. Maybe I haven't articulated that the best in this section, I hope I have, but it just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe I'm the only one, maybe I'm just sitting here spouting off like a homeless person on the street saying that JFK was assassinated by the Illuminati or whatever, and they have systems in place already, and this is not something to worry about, and I'm spouting off about nothing, but it still doesn't feel right to me. And that's all I can do. So I hope I've at least gotten you to think about it. I'm more than open to listening to what you have to say. I've been talking to many people on Twitter, on the SWTOR subreddit. I've been downvoted to oblivion on the SWTOR subreddit for this topic, so if you check all the way at the bottom of the announcement page, you'll see the conversation I had there. Or you can check my Twitter where I've been talking to people, and I'm more than happy to discuss with you. So you can always tweet me at GTEEG, GTEEG on Twitter, or you can email me gaddockteeg@gaddockgaming.com. And now for something a little less heavy. The Wall of Crazy.
What? That's impossible even for a computer.
It's not impossible. I used to bullseye womp rats in my T16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters.
And seeing as I did not have a great topic or unifying topic to this week's episode, I decided to go for a free-for-all Wall of Crazy topic like the olden days when I didn't give a specific thing to post about. I just asked for you to give me a feature on Twitter that you'd like to see added to the game. Let's just go through a couple here. Vizsla Legacy at the Vizsla Legacy says, I want to see planets of Rakata Prime, Talos, Dantooine, Kashyyyk, Manan, Duxun, Onderon, Osis, and Zeost added to the game. Now, all of those planets would be pretty cool. I, of course, would love to see Kashyyyk, just like everyone and their mother would love to see Kashyyyk. I think being on the treetops of that planet would be pretty awesome, if you ask me. Justin Sinudo at jsinudo says, buddy system with Padawan Master, specific missions and storylines, that would be pretty cool. I maybe will see that in expansion sometime. I think that would be pretty nice. I think this game's leveling is so strong that it could carry new players that haven't even tried the game yet, even though it's 3 years old. I think it could get new players into the game, and it would especially be easy to get new players into the game if I could level down with my friends and play with them in an easy fashion that didn't trivialize everything for them. SWTOR Miner, who I discussed already in this episode, at SWTOR_Miner, is now on Twitter, so go follow him if you want to get all your spoiler goodness, because he is great at what he does. He says more guild features to go with our ship, guild tax, guild activity log, guild calendars, guild vs. guild PvP, guild albums, etc. All stuff I'd love to see. I did like many episodes in the early days of this show, just basically devoted to these guild features that I'd like to see added, and I'd definitely love to see all of those features coming to a game near you soon. Clea at Chadrasa says more class story, same gender romance arcs with companions, more endgame stuff for solo players, instance areas for role-playing. I think all of those would be great, especially the instance areas for role-playing. I think that players have been asking for that for a long time, role players, especially being able to revisit some of those areas where you have class stories, some of those cooler areas would be really cool if players could go back and roleplay there for something. There are tons of awesome looking spaces, and I think they've discussed this at one of the Cantina events, making some new awesome looking spaces for players to roleplay in, but you could just go back and look at some of that stuff. That would be pretty cool. And finally, Tony Rhett at Tony Rhett says, I would love to see armor kits to convert pieces from a specific armor type to adaptive. Also convert BOP armor to bind to legacy. I think that would be a pretty cool idea. I have plenty of stuff in my banks that is bound to my character, or stuff that I'd love to be able to bring to other characters. Hopefully with the legacy bank, that will be a possibility. But also things that are locked to a certain kind of armor. Would be nice if we can get that adaptive, because those were made before the adaptive system even existed. So if we could get that stuff changed, that would be pretty cool. And I said finally, but there's one more that I feel like I have to highlight because it's just such an awesome idea. And that comes from Tano_G at the Narcissus Citizen. A legacy debit card, so I don't have to leave the GTN to use credits that aren't on me, but are in my legacy bank. I think that's a great idea, and I would love it if I was able to just stockpile all of my credits on one area in one guild bank, so I can spend them all from there, because it's really annoying having to log out, log into a different character, send the credits over, realize I didn't send enough, go back, send more credits. Oh, this character doesn't have the credits, I have to go to this character because that's the one where I have the credits right now. That rigmarole is really annoying. I think they're trying to solve a lot of that with the legacy bank, and that's just another thing that could be solved using the new legacy banks that are coming with Galactic Strongholds. And I think that'll about do it for today's show. Again, we did not have a listener email this week because I had so much to talk about, so no Astromech code again this time. Sorry. Next week, I promise I will give out an Astromech code. I will pick one of your emails to discuss. If you'd like to be entered to win an Astromech code, if you'd like the chance to win one, all you have to do is email a topic for the show to gaddockteague@gaddockgaming.com. So you just email me anything. If I cover it on the show, you'll win a nice Astromech code. As always, if you'd like to contact me, you can send your questions, comments, and concerns to gaddockteague@gaddockgaming.com, or you can tweet them to @gteague on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes to get your weekly podcast updates, and like I said last week, I'm now on Stitcher, so you can get me on there if you have... I don't know what uses Stitcher really, but I know a lot of people asked me to get on it, so I did it. But yeah, if you have a magical Stitcher device, then you can now get me there. If you're new to the game or thinking of resubscribing, I provided my refer friend link in the show notes, so if you'd like a little added incentive to come back, feel free to use it. You can also check out my website, gaddockgaming.com, where I post the podcast, any of my videos. Hopefully I'll have some patch 2.8 videos, even though there doesn't really seem to be a ton of content to be looking at if they're not going to put the gambling on there. But we'll see. And any other gaming stuff that I want to post somewhere. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unnamed SWTOR Podcast. This is JD, signing off.